I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, and this is the Doctor's Guide podcast, raw and unfiltered. And so, have you ever wondered, what's that health journey all about for you? And are you struggling on that journey? Are you finding the solutions? Is conventional medicine serving you, or are you going outside, into the wilderness, if you will, into finding your health optimization? The truth is that there's so many incredible individuals on this planet today, either in conventional medicine or outside of it, that have the solutions for you. But the challenge is, where are they? How do I find them? So this podcast series is really not about promoting a certain product or a certain person, but it's actually sharing with you the process by which you can then navigate this journey of yours to optimize your health. Because here's the truth. In today's world, something I could not have said about 5 years ago, but certainly today, we have all the tools and resources and the people that can guide us to an optimum health. Yes, it's true. We've got the technologies, we've got all the different types of insights and information, but most importantly, we now understand our bodies at a level because of incredible individuals like David Thunder, who's joining me today. And so what is today all about? How do we share with you that process by which you can make better decisions? And that is through role play. So we're going to do a 6-minute role play after, both David and Chad have introduced themselves, who they are, what their unique identity is, what is their magic. And they're going to role play with a presentation of a particular health issue or health problem. And then the other will guide them through that process. And after about 6 minutes, it may go a little bit longer. I think last show did go a little bit longer, which was awesome, by the way. And if you haven't listened to that one, that's an absolute must. If you really want to find some of the secrets about optimizing health, you got to listen to that other podcast with Chad Cooper and David Thunder. But we'll do the role play for about 6 minutes between David and Chad. And then we're going to unpack that so that you can leave today with a very specific insight. So you're going to want to listen to that, as well as a specific action step that you can then take on that journey to optimize your health. David, thank you so much for joining me today. We had a spectacular show the other day. And so do a brief introduction about who you are. Then we'll go to Chad, and then we'll figure out what that role play is going to be, and then we'll just dive in.
Cool. Thank you. So my name is David, and I have been working in healthcare for 32 years. I think it's 32 years. And in that time, I've seen just amazing transformations in people. And I, to this day, don't know what the limits of the capabilities of the human body is. But what I do know is the human body has its own innate healing capabilities. And I've really made it my mission to try and find what those tools are that people need and teach them those tools and the mindset to empower them to manage their own health. So effectively, you're teaching someone how to fish rather than fishing for them. So that's really been my mission, and it's been something that has been my life's work and feels like it doesn't belong to me, but it's something that it's almost like something I have to get out into the world as a mission and a passion.
So I would like to translate what David just shared with us, because
so I went off a tangent there.
Absolute genius in his ability to help people take back their own power and the body's ability to heal itself. It's quite remarkable what he's capable of doing. And I certainly recommend that if you have not listened to the previous podcast, listen to that, because there's so much magic that will absolutely serve you. Well, there's another magician, and that's Chad, my dear friend, mentor, coach, brother, list goes on. So briefly about you and your mentor.
Yeah, let me just even paraphrase what you said, Bart. Real simple. David fixes shit you broke in yourself. It's your fault. He'll help you fix it. Okay. That's what he does. Gets to the root, not symptoms. For me, it's really similar in terms of my purpose and my calling. In that is to help people get to the root of thriving in the material world while discovering and holding an intimate relationship with their spiritual wellness, right? So for me, it was a long time, and a lot of my clients will come, they've built their empires, but they're saying something's missing. And so what I'm really committed to doing is usually that something that's missing is a relationship with their soul, their spirit, their higher self, whatever you call that in whatever part of the world that you're in. And that's really kind of my mission, is to go around the world and to learn from other cultures and then bring those around cultures of the world to help people thrive. So that's in essence what gets me out of bed with excitement every day.
That's your ikigai, right? The reason
Yeah.
you get up every single day.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Chad. And again, Chad has been on this podcast before, and definitely want to listen to his magic and his wisdom, because it is transformative, and it certainly has helped me in so many brilliant ways. And I'm so appreciative, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Chad Cooper. So David, what's the problem that you're presenting today and being guided by Chad Cooper?
Okay,
Just one of them, David.
it's just one of the problems. Okay. So one of the things that I've seen a lot, and really kind of it was highlighted, say, during the pandemic, when all of that stuff was going on, was uncertainty. Now, neurologically, uncertainty is very difficult for the brain to deal with, and it's very difficult for the autonomic nervous system to handle. So you tend to get people with their fight or flight system just constantly in a state of activation. There's a dimmer switch on the fight or flight system that constantly gets lit. And yeah, it has an impact on the body's ability to then repair and heal. But what leads uncertainty is certainty. And in times when I have flipped into that fight or flight response in myself, it's when I've turned to Chad and his methodology. And there was an event not that long ago where I would say I was operating from my reptilian brain. I was angry and I was stuck in a pattern. I didn't want it to move into my physiology. I didn't want it to kind of manifest in my tissues, in my body, and become something down the line. So my first port of call was to reach out to Chad. So my question to you, Chad, is like, how do you unpack that? And what is the work to be done from there?
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful question, David, because if the COVID pandemic gave us anything, it was to help us get off of the hamster wheel and for a second take a breather and go, holy crap, I'm living in an absolute circus, right? For most of the world. Ironically, that the people who lived in developing parts of the world were far better off through the pandemic. And you can look at the statistics, and part of that is because they had less rules of what it meant to win, right? Whoever has the least amount of rules is likely going to be the most happy. And so on the surface of that, usually, as Confucius says, life is really simple, but we keep insisting on making it complicated. And the human condition loves to do that. And so one of the things that I see as a really sincere intention of a lot of therapists, a lot of coaches that are out there, is to start with, well, David, what are your goals and your objectives, right? When we look at life coaching today and executive coaching, it's all about action and goals and objectives. And there's really nothing wrong with that until you look at, do you have all of the other ingredients to bake the cake? And so when we find that we're not getting results, when we find, oh my gosh, I'm trying to balance a lot of things, what we really need to look at underneath that is, as James Clear, if you want a really good, concise book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, he says, your bank account is an indicator of your financial habits, right? So when you're in chaos, we can offer as well that, goals and objectives aren't enough. We don't want to ignore it, but really what we want to do during the pandemic is to look at, what were your habits? What were your processes? Or on this side, process. And Were you showing up in life as a hobbyist or as a professional, right? That's really where we can take a look and say, what's your foundation? And so when we're compromised, we can say chaos, but in reality, when we're compromised, right? Oh crap, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do with these emotions. It usually comes back to really taking a look at and saying, do we have a foundation of positive, supportive habits? And the answer is usually what? No. But we're going to double down. We're going to ignore that, and we're just going to go and take a lot more action. And what ends up happening is we become kind of like an octopus on roller skates. There's a lot of movement, but not in any focused, productive direction. And so we end up just being exhausted without actually making any progress. So one of the things that we need to do is begin. There's three pieces in this. The first is, yeah, you need clarity on your goals and your objectives. Second is you need to look at your processes, your habits. But most importantly under this, and we talked about before on the other one, was your identity, okay? Do you have an identity that supports pulling towards those processes and habits, or pushing you away from? Because without an empowering identity, you're kind of screwed, right? So I had a manufacturing executive, one of the biggest plastic manufacturing owners in the United States. He's like, I want to retire in 5 years. And he's talking about all the things that he needs to do. He's got the goals clear. He knows what the habits are, but he's not doing the habits. And so when we know what we need to do, but we're not doing it, I said, has it occurred to you that at some point you need to change your identity from being the operator to being the instructor, the trainer, and the mentor of your people in order to hand off the reins? And he goes, holy shit, you're right. See, he didn't have an identity that was congruent with the behaviors and the habits. And so in that situation, if you find somebody's agitating, you find somebody's, let's say, not showing up in an ethical or in a belief system that matches yours, we first have to ask ourselves, what's the identity I'm showing up as? Am I showing up as the jerk and the angry person? I'm a victim? Or are we showing up with the tools of patience, understanding before we jump to conclusions? And that fourth piece in that is really about an opportunity. David, as you know, the Enneagram. We know that it comes from Egypt, the times of the pharaohs of Egypt. We don't know exactly, but it is the oldest profile quiz in history. And what that will do is it allows us to actually get an understanding of who am I becoming through my wings, and what are some of the things I need to let go of in order to become that person. And so in that situation, it was a matter of what do I need to let go of in order to make room of who I want to become and have a productive conversation.
Yeah, if I can jump in there for a second, what I would say is in that particular moment with that incident, because I would say most of the time I'm very aligned with all the things you were saying, but this was something that triggered my reptilian brain. It was something that blindsided me. I wasn't expecting it. And in that moment, I wasn't able to access where it was. And I think this is where the power of like a good coach, someone external to you that can guide you through a process that has the depth of profiling you. And this is, you brought me back to the Enneagram beautifully and said, actually, do you know what? This is along this line here, and this is where your wings, and this is your opportunity to upgrade. And as soon as I was able to see it like that, I was very easy to transform my physiology and how my nervous system was responding in that moment to then be in a resourceful state and looking at where I was operating from.
Yeah, it's funny how the universe, when we say, I always laugh when people go, I prayed for patience. I'm like, what are you, an idiot? Don't pray for patience, because you know what it's going to give you? The opposite, to exhibit and exert patience. For you, you're like, I want to grow on my wings. So what did the universe do? It went, here's the opportunity. And it was an opportunity to remind you, oh, if you want to master this, you have to bring in and allow these wings to lift you up. You have to build the muscle of those wings. And so when we can do that, and somebody from the outside can allow us to see what's blind to us, but not in a judgmental way, but they allow us to see that in an empathetic and compassionate, supportive way, it allows us to then go, oh, I have an identity that can support that. Okay, I'm going to get uncomfortable. And you exhibited the tipping point between force energy, anger, pride, all of those low energies. And you exhibited courage, which is the tipping point to say, I have a willingness and acceptance to lean into this despite or regardless of how the other person's going to show up.
Yeah.
So-
And that,
Go ahead. Let's
sorry,
wrap
no,
it up.
it was transformative, like in a very, because we'd done the foundational work, like that conversation was able to bring me out from a state which I didn't think was going to move quickly, very, very fast, because I had the understanding and the insight. So it's beautiful, because you were able to really see the blind spots and help me through a structured process. And yeah, my nervous system regulated very quickly. So
yeah, and by the way, the secret or the other side of that is you mastered that very gracefully and diplomatically.
So one thing I want to honor you both, because I've known you, Chad, for a long time, and we've had many incredible experiences.
Sorry.
It's the willingness to be vulnerable, and it's in that place of vulnerability that we can actually get our breakthroughs, because that then shines the light, on our blind spots. And so I want to definitely honor, both of you for having that courage to take that journey, because so often either the person with the issue and the other person trying to guide are not willing to take on that journey. And it's the only way that we will ever get those breakthroughs. But one thing I do want to add as a distinction, and that's a personal distinction that I have, because sometimes my reptilian brain gets fired up. And it's really from the context of, besides all the things that Chad already shared, but from the context of, the ability to influence from the heart. And then there's that disconnect of language, there's a disconnect of concepts, there's a disconnect of experiences, and then to try to navigate with other individuals as to what your truth is versus theirs. And that's a brilliant journey that I've recently started with a group called Sean Callaghy. He's the blind attorney with his Unblinded program. And it's been revolutionary for me as well, besides all the things that Chad has shared, but also coming from that place of the heart of influence and how do we influence others, authentically, in alignment, and everything else. Want to have Chad, respond to that, and David as well, as we then unpack it even further.
Yeah, I guess I would say, that vulnerability and that courageous is the catalyst part. But when we think of martial arts as an example, we always think of violence. We always think of the power to be able to go in and use force. But Tai Chi is also a martial art. And the Tai Chi philosophy is, the softer you are, the stronger you are. The more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. Gentleness is the most powerful energy in the universe, right? But that requires the willingness in us to be vulnerable and to put ourselves aside and say, I'm going to give this a whirl. I'm going to give this a shot. And that can require an enormous amount of vulnerability and courage to do that. But I cannot make you feel anything. You have to make that decision. So I didn't learn any of this stuff in public school systems. I didn't learn any of this. In fact, it's really kind of a disservice, because as much as I love the church, man, growing up, I don't know, blah, blah, is like, what is he talking about? Brimstone and fire and sin is all. And I was like, I lost all of the meaning. And as an adult, I learned, holy crap, there's some real wisdom in a lot of this stuff, right? But we have to be willing to take a step aside and start having a relationship for ourselves and say, who am I? And the thing that I loved about with David is hopefully, I think, David, you never felt like I was judging you or saying, oh, you're wrong. It was like, dude, this is just who you are. Is this who you want to continue to be is the question. And that's really something that a powerful friend or therapist or coach can come alongside and ask, do you want to do the work once the answer is revealed? That's where the courageous part begins.
And then to top that off, it's what Hippocrates said about 2,500 years ago. And the question is, is the patient willing to give up whatever it is that caused him, to be sick in the first place? And so what's true 2,500 years ago is absolutely true today. David, any thoughts that you want to unpack with this conversation?
I love that quote. Are you willing to give up? So from like a mindset stance, I would guess, are you willing to give up the story?
Yep.
Your own story? Is that true? Are you willing to question that and have that curiosity that very well may make you wrong? I've had various moments in my life where I've like metaphorically believed like the world is flat, and then someone's come along and said the world is round, and it's made everything that I've thought before that wrong. And in those moments, I've taken a deep breath and gone, okay, show me everything. Just willing to sort of have that upgrade. So having that courage in the first place. And I think I love talking about heart rate coherence. So I love the fact that that's the journey that you're on now, Bart, because I think that's beautiful, because the torus field is a measurable field around the heart. And when you're in coherence, when you're operating from, I think as David Hawkins would talk about, the scale of consciousness of like that 1,000-point system, like a mountain range, where at the bottom of the mountain range, you're walking in shame and fear and anger. And at the top is sort of love and courage and enlightenment. Like when you're operating from those higher emotions, it changes how the magnetic field of your heart performs. And to Chad's strength, that's where your true strength comes from. I stepped into a boxing ring last year, not because I particularly wanted to have a boxing fight, but it was to know that I had the ability to defend my family if I needed to after an event that had happened, and it just left a question for me. But I found my true strength, and it wasn't from a place of anger. It was from a very loving, coherent place that was actually able to unlock a lot of my physiology. So it's a really beautiful journey and a huge subject in itself.
Wow, so powerful. And I recently, again, through the Sean Callagher group, came to recognize that loving unconditionally with boundaries is the magic state that I can find myself in. And it relaxes me in so many of these different situations that otherwise in the past would have triggered me again into that reptilian mode, because, through time, and our brain is geared for survival and is geared to recognize all these threats. And that's where this whole concept of certainty comes from. And that's one of our 6 behavioral needs. And when all that gets challenged, then yes, your body's going to respond to your fight, freeze, or flee, right? So, but that's all a construct within us. And so you're absolutely right. When we can get into the heart coherence, and this, again, as a scientist, was very hard for me to accept, because, people say, well, just love, right? Just do that. Just love unconditionally. But there's scientific proof that every pulsation of the heart emits an electromagnetic field that spans at least 12 to 15 feet away from you. So said differently, that electromagnetic field, which is essentially information, is affecting every single cell in your body. And guess what? Then the health of those cells. So critical things for the listeners to understand, that your thoughts make a real difference, and your ability to navigate these crazy thoughts that are misdirecting you because they think the world is flat when it's actually very different. Therefore, finding people like David and Chad is absolutely the key. So I'd like to give David the last word this time, and then we'll follow up with Chad, and then how do people find you?
So the last word on this is digging into your identity and working on this piece, is making sure that you are able to work on your emotional state. Your heart rate coherence is so important, because, as you said, it affects every cell in your body. It massively impacts your health. And the reason why I called Chad immediately was because I didn't want it moving into my physiology. I genuinely, I'm very blessed in my choices. I have a wonderful partner. I have a loving family. When I put my head on the pillow at night, I'm in love and gratitude. I really am, for the life I have. And I would encourage people to do the work to find that place, which is why working with someone like Chad is so key.
And then not only working with Chad, but working with someone like yourself.
Of course.
Structure,
Yeah.
body in alignment and the central nervous system, because all of it is integrated and affects each other. Chad.
Yeah, I what's sticking in my head is the epiphany, fight, flight, or freeze are all low vibrational energies. And all in what stands in contrast, there is no opposite, is love. Right? You have a fourth choice. I would invite you to make it the number one choice, and that is just choose to love. But just because you choose to have courage, choose to love, boys and girls, you better figure out having a process and habits that supports that. And you better be clear on the outcome that you need to have in addition, right? So, I think it was the Dalai Lama that said, prayer alone is not enough. What you need is prayer and action. And so I hope that if you choose to say, I'm not going to choose fight, or freeze, I'm going to choose love, great. Make sure you follow it up with the skill sets that complement that so that you actually get to your outcome.
And it's available for everyone. Chad, how do we get a hold of you? And then we'll go to
You
David.
can't. I'm done. You know what? You can't get a hold of me. But if
Which
you
is actually
want
probably
to,
a good thing. It's probably a good thing that nobody can get a hold of you, because
exactly.
they have to
It's
deal
really
with.
hard. chad@chadecooper.com. I mean, you can go to the website, you can email me, and I'm happy to have a conversation and see what I can do to support you.
And Chad does wonderful humanitarian work throughout the world, and is always looking, and I'll do a promo for him for more support, more funding, because he believes absolutely in the work that he does. I'm also part of that process and supporting him, carrying the opportunities or delivering opportunities for people to step up in their own lives. So his work is absolutely remarkable. David, how do people get a hold of you?
Simple. It's just an email, david@dthunder.com.
Great.
That's it.
So once again, I'm absolutely honored and blessed to have both of you on this podcast. This podcast has been a long time in making, over the last 20 years, evolving from all sorts of ideas into an aggregate of some to deliver the opportunity for people to find their best journey to optimize themselves in all the dimensions that we live in. And so these kinds of conversations are real, they're authentic. Oftentimes we're vulnerable, we're honest. And the truth is that this is also that space where people can also relate and understand that they're not alone. And without that judgment that oftentimes that we use to actually protect our own brain, our own mind. But the truth is, by loving unconditionally and just recognizing, yeah, it's a different reality, that it's a different frame, they're coming from a different place. Just appreciate and respect that their world is different, but recognizing that they're also human. And the one thing I like to say to everyone, and just give yourself permission to be human. I mean, there's no such thing as perfectly imperfect. You're just human. And so we all have those challenges and struggles. And fortunately, there's some beautiful souls like the two here today that can guide us towards a better quality of life and longevity in so many different ways. I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, and this is the Doctor's Guide podcast, raw and unfiltered. And we will be back. And David and Chad, again, thank you so much for today.